We talk a lot about tangibles, and we're talking about economic tangibles, and that's absolutely vital and important. That's how you secure your position in the present and maintain it into the future. But there's also something else that needs to also be discussed, and that happens to be intangibles, not things that don't matter, but I'm talking about things aside from actual physical resources. You see, part of getting the economic base in order is to be on code. The behavior that we value and hold in high esteem, that's going to be the kind of behavior that we get. But an organized and structured society doesn't leave that to chance. People have to be taught what the proper values for a forward-moving group are. This is the reason why so much of white society's advertising and so much of their art and imagery and dramas happen to have some white man who's standing up giving some soliloquy while people look on in adoration. And the reason why is that's image training. What it's saying is this is how you ought to behave. But they always make sure that they don't show black people in that position, because after all, you don't want to have black people being seen as someone that people should look up to be empowered. As Dr. Claude Anderson said, a code of conduct. As for what that means, I think the TBA gave the best definition of it that I've heard, which is we all know what is in our interests, to which I would add, and we act accordingly. That would be the best definition of a code of conduct. A people who know what is in their interest and who acts accordingly. That's how you know that people understand what is in their interest. You can see it by what they do. Honest business, respecting one another's property, and that includes their reputation. Telling people things in private before you decide to try to get some instant clout by going on Twitter. These are things that show we know what's in our interest, and people can tell that by how we act. A key part of getting the economic peace in order comes down to fixing the culture. But what does culture mean? Culture means the way that a particular group of people does things. That's what culture means. And how do we do things? Creatively, vibrantly. That's what our culture is, and everybody understands that. Unfortunately, when it comes to our interpersonal dealings with one another, and also how we deal with this white supremacist society and the wannabe white supremacists, you know who I'm talking about. Well, unfortunately, all too often the word that describes our culture then is messy. So, what can we do to fix this? Well, one place we could start would be for those of us who are doing things right to stop supporting and protecting those in our lives who are doing things wrong. The reason that we're overrun with Pookies, Ray Rays, and Bushikas is because we decided to have a big tent, and too many of us kept taking up for them. So blackness becomes this patchwork of creativity, messiness, honest aspirations, and total deviancy. We try to make room for everyone and everything, and all that does is it gives you a mess. Without us, these dusty dudes and hood rats, including the sophisticated ones, they couldn't exist at all. We drive the culture, not parasites. Our problem is that we spent a long time trying to make a place in our culture for people who have no place in it. I said it many years ago, merely having a requisite amount of melanin isn't enough. You also must show that you understand the code of conduct, too. But a code will only have meaning when people act like it does. That's what gives a code meaning. Not for appearance's sake, but because they genuinely value it. A code matters. Because when you look at the black community today, you see what happens when the code is not the leader, or when people decide that a code doesn't even have significance. Dr. John Henry Clark said that a large part of what happened to us during slavery was that it destroyed our value system. First, they took away our agency at the personal level. This was catastrophic because it diminishes and damages the essential respect that a human being must have for themselves. And since we no longer saw ourselves as being able to control or even influence our fate or our condition, we also saw everyone who looked like us in the same sorry state, and we associated blackness with powerlessness. One of the cruelest aspects of the miseducation of the Negro was to teach black people that they're not worthy of respect. And for a lot of us, that lesson took, and we're still stumbling over it today. Next, the white supremacists established that they were the only authority. So we stopped looking to each other for anything. This is what set the frame for practically all of the off-code behavior that we've been plagued with ever since. Doesn't matter if it's Pookie and Ray Ray, or Candace Owens, Roly Poly Martin, or Clarence Thomas. This dysfunction that we wrestle with was foisted upon us. It was forced upon us. But the same people who put this dysfunction into our midst, they're not going to remove it because it works to their advantage. So we have to do it. But first, we got to put aside this lie that we've convinced ourselves of, that a lot of this dirtbag behavior and the people perpetrating it, well, they just don't know any better. Actually, they do. A lot of black people have known for 150 years now that they could undermine and attack black society openly and still be able to eat the next day, however raggedly, because white power would feed them. It wouldn't feed them a lot, crumbs, but white power would still give them something. So hood rats and dusty dudes, they chased Section 8 vouchers and county disability checks. And on the other end of the spectrum, you had Negroes who would do anything to get a consulting job from a white company, that is, or a guest hosting gig on TV, a political office, or some middle management position, preferably in a white corporation. Now, before we go any farther, there's absolutely nothing wrong with these things in and of themselves. We're the most oppressed people on the planet, so if someone genuinely needs a housing voucher, they ought to get it. And if someone plies their talent and effort and climbs the corporate ladder, that's a good thing. I have no problem with that. But what I'm referring to are the black people who didn't want to be on code, so they use the government as their safety net so they can keep being trashy and messy and still be able to eat the next day. And I'm also referring to the people who help white power to spread lies against us through their media and their political apparatuses, and who gladly be the black face in the room for corporations who don't hire us and who give them cover while they dump poison in our community or while they refuse to do business with us. It's as I've always said, the entire purpose behind any media is to promote a particular value system. When you praise, honor, and reward certain behavior, you get more of it. When you show that these are our values and they're held in high esteem, you're going to encourage people to continue that behavior. 15 years ago, I said the mission of the black media was to take control of the social discourse within the black community and to elevate the debate. Well, a huge part of taking control of the discourse is to define what we ought to value. Because those are the things that a people reach us for and will act to protect. But you cannot protect anything unless there's an enforcement mechanism in place. And we have to be uncompromising about enforcing the rules. All this letting everyone do whatever they want to do has to stop. A lot of this dirtbag behavior is rooted in the fact that too many of us make excuses for it. Either because someone we know is doing this backstabbing mess and we don't want to let them face the consequences of their actions, or because some of us are doing it ourselves. Black empowerment starts with you. Yes, the foundation of our lack of code enforcement is because we are in a society that oppresses us and does all it can to make sure we have no power over our own lives, much less our communities. But we have to be honest. A large part of what we see going on is because we've allowed it. The bootlicks and dirtbags don't have us outnumbered or outorganized. We haven't dropped the hammer on them. And whenever someone does, there always seems to be many of us who try to stop it or to cut them a break or are way too eager to make excuses for them. So having the power alone is not enough. We must also have the will. Honoring that which edifies us and punishing that which undermines us is the exact same thing. Praising honorable behavior is far easier than punishing the dirtbags. But we don't do it nearly as much as we should. This is why the vapid and degenerate values that we see displayed in music videos, movies, and crappy TV shows are the things that black folks have basically internalized and put on a pedestal, and worst of all, we've claimed this as being our values. And that's because the white media uses their money and their reach to promote those things, to dress up degeneracy in the trappings of wealth, and then put a black face on the front of it. Most of the black folks who imitate those self-destructive images, they're not going to make a dime off of it, but at the very least, they can get some quickie attention, and sadly, for a lot of us, that is our primary value. The hood rats and dusty dudes decided that they would surrender their dignity and suffer in silence, and the bootlicks and turncoats decided that they could surrender our safety and our prosperity and dignity, just so they could get some crumbs from their corporate or political masters. Well, that may be good enough for the bottom feeders, but should that be good enough for us? Of course not. So we have to take a hard-nosed approach to our power. We don't need all of us to be on board. In fact, I don't want all of us to be on board, because we need to separate ourselves from the do-nothings and no-goodniks who aren't taking us anywhere. A lot of black people don't want black empowerment because they think they found a comfortable place under white supremacy. Well, as far as I'm concerned, let them sit exactly where they are. And when white daddy finally decides that he's no longer going to tolerate their presence, that they don't amuse him anymore, not even as his whipping boy, they'll be running to us and they'll find the door closed, as they should. Either we are serious about our interest or we're not. It's time for a gathering of eagles, and eagles don't allow vipers or sloths to hang around their nests. Starting today, I want you to take a look at yourself and those in your circle. Have you surrounded yourself with a ring of iron or a ring of fools? Be honest with yourself about that. Your power depends on it. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Peggy Taylor, Discount Moving Labor, Codified Trucking, Eddie Newsom, and Frederica Moore. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.